The PBM assessment is an extensive set of questions or criteria for those familiar with biology terminology for an organization to evaluate their deployment of process-based thinking. We've developed the assessment to aid organizations in establishing a baseline to use in determining where they have gaps in their implementation. The output of an assessment consists of a feedback report, evaluations of strengths and gaps, and an overall score, along with the stage of deployment, including recommended action steps. The assessment is divided into 6 categories and an organizational profile. The organizational profile provides a snapshot of key components of the organization's process efforts, their current methods and tools that are being used, the operating environment, and also the challenges that they experience or face in implementing process-based management. The next category is strategy and planning, which actually examines how your business strategy and process-based management strategy integrate with one another. It also evaluates how the organization executes its plan for implementing and continuously improving process-based management. The second category in the assessment is governance. Governance examines the roles, the responsibilities, and structures that are in place to oversee the implementation and management of process-based management. The third category is deployment and integration. Deployment and integration examines the extent to which PBM deployment has been achieved, what your approach is for cross-process integration, how you do alignment with other improvement methodologies, and also stakeholder involvement. The fourth category in the assessment is evaluation, which really looks at examining how measures are designed and monitored to track the implementation of process-based management, and it also evaluates PBM implementation against leading practices. The fifth category is process knowledge management. This category really looks at examining how the structures and practices are in place for capturing and utilizing process knowledge across the organization. And then finally, the last category, and probably one of the most important ones, is culture and adaptation. And this category really examines how you communicate your PBM strategy, how you develop and maintain PBM competencies, and then also how do you adapt your culture towards process-based management. The PBM Roadmap has been developed to provide a structured set of stages that can be tailored to any environment based on specific results from an assessment. So the roadmap is really sectioned into 2 different aspects. One is management of individual processes, and one is process-based management. The first stage in the roadmap is our aware stage, and this is for organizations that are just starting along the roadmap to process-based management, just becoming aware that processes are important and that an overall process-based management approach is important. The next stage is our committed stage, and this is the stage at where you look to get engagement from the organization to a commitment to implementing process-based management. The third stage is engaged. This is where we actually have the organization engaged in establishing process-based thinking, getting some of the foundational pieces in place, and actually getting the organization moving forward. The fourth stage is what we call managed stage, and this managed stage is really where organizations are managing individual processes, and it can actually include aspects of the aware, committed, and engaged stages in terms of some of the attributes. Most organizations will stay in the managed stage, and they may be managing multiple processes, but their focus is really on actually managing individual processes. The next stage is what we call integrated stage, and at this stage an organization is really looking to how do they integrate and incorporate cross-process thinking in terms of managing their processes from an integrated environment. The next stage is what we call embedded, and this is where we see organizations actually have embedded process-based management thinking into the organization, and it is sustainable going forward. And then finally, the last stage is what we call realized, in which an organization has extended process-based management outside of their organization to the supply chain, to their customers, to their stakeholders. Now, an organization will navigate through the roadmap via what we call pathways. And the first pathway is what we call discovery. And this is how an organization would move from the aware stage to the committed stage. The next pathway is called foundation, which is putting all the foundation pieces in place and moves an organization from a committed stage to the engaged stage. The next pathway is what we call transition, and this is where the organization is transitioning to managing individual processes and moves them out of the engaged stage into the managed stage. The next pathway, and probably the one that's the hardest and takes the longest, is what we call transformation. And this is where organizations actually are crossing the chasm from managing individual processes to moving to more of a process-based management approach in terms of trying to integrate and link all their processes together and manage a whole portfolio of processes. The next stage is moving from integrated to embedded, which is institutionalized pathway, and that moves the organization closer to embedding process-based management. And then finally, the last pathway is optimization, and optimization actually moves the organization from embedded to realized, where you're actually optimizing all of your processes and fully implemented process-based management. For each of the pathways that we've defined, we've identified detailed steps for each pathway. We have over 100 different steps, 100 plus steps in the roadmap, which defines what you do, why you do it, how you do it, who's responsible for doing it, and what the inputs and the outputs are. So that's a brief overview of the roadmap to process-based management. So let's take a look at how these two components of process-based management, the assessment and the roadmap, will work together with one another and work in concert with one another. And let's take it and take a look at it in terms of going in for a checkup and getting a prognosis. You wouldn't go into a doctor and say, give me this certain medicine because I think I had this certain problem. The doctor would first want to do a diagnosis, and the diagnosis stage is really what we see as the assessment stage, and that all organizations should do some type of an assessment to establish a baseline. This assessment then will tell you what stage of process-based management you're at in terms of the roadmap. Are you at the discovery or the aware stage, the integrated stage, the managing processes, etc.? And then based upon that assessment, you'll also be identified what gaps exist in the implementation of process-based management. And then finally, the assessment will provide suggested action plans for how you would address those gaps in implementation. Now, how that actually works is we actually take the prescription side of the equation, which is really the roadmap. The roadmap provides for each step, each stage. It provides, the pathway as to how you move through that roadmap, and then for each of the pathways, we actually have individual steps that an organization would actually do for each pathway. Well, the way that these two have been designed together is that once you do an assessment, these suggested action plans that come from the assessment are actually the specific pathway steps. So we've linked the assessment to a prescriptive aspect, which is the roadmap. And once you implement those suggested action plans, then you would constantly do ongoing monitoring to see where you've made progress, where you still have gaps, and then again pull back from the roadmap the specific steps that you need to execute. So that kind of gives you a brief summary of how the PBM assessment and the roadmap have been designed to work together. If you have more questions, please go to our contact page and send us an email. We will be more than happy to answer any questions.